If I had a magic one policy, it'd be mandatory national service. If you look at the lowest levels of young adult depression in the West, it's 2 countries. It's Israel and Singapore. And despite all the existential threats facing Israel.
Glad you mentioned the Navy. Recently, I was invited out to the Naval Academy in Annapolis and had the privilege of giving a talk to 4,000 midshipmen, which includes both young men and women.
Yep.
It was an amazing experience. I'll tell you this. A guy who's been a guest on this podcast was the one that organized this, Coleman Ruiz, has an amazing life story. He's not particularly public facing, but amazing story of his own life. So you go there, and all these young men and women are, of course, in their, cadet fatigues and going about. They live 2 to a dorm room. They do PT, physical activity, every morning at 5 a.m. Lunch was the most incredible experience. You walk into a dining hall with thousands of men and women, tons of noise. A bell goes off. Everyone's quiet. Everyone sits down. A bell goes off. Everyone starts eating. 15 minutes later, bell goes off. Everyone stands up and walks out. Everyone has to play a sport competitively. Everyone there is forbidden from using their phone most all of the day and night. One member of this dorm room might be studying while their roommate is sleeping. Every single question was about how to be a better human being physically, mentally, emotionally. And this visit was right in the early days of the recent war with Iran. So they had a lot to worry about. And they're very close to all these things. A young woman came up to me and told me that she's part of the space program, the military space program. Amazing, just a complete contrast to everything that we're talking about. I thought to myself, goodness, these people, young people like this still exist.
Yeah.
All firm handshakes, all eye contact. And by the way, every color you could possibly imagine. Every color you could possibly imagine. Every stature you could possibly imagine. Yeah. Every income class. I would ask people, where are you from? Part of the meet and greet, the problem was they were like, my problem is I actually want to know about where people are from, what their name is, what they're interested in. That it can just take days, right? But it was incredible. And I thought to myself, okay, there's hope. We came out of there, our team was there's hope. Okay, it's associated with the military. I'm sure people will scratch at that point. But thank God that these kids and this thing that we call the Navy exists, because it was so inspiring. It made me level up as a 50-year-old man who thinks he's got his shit mostly together, emphasis on mostly. I was like, whoa, I step it up. Now, probably their only quote unquote flaw was I did a poll. There were a lot of questions about nicotine. And I asked approximately what percentage of the room takes nicotine every day. And I would say about 20 to 30% of the hands in the room went up. Nicotine is in major use in young people.
Are they using the
oral nicotines, yeah, which by the way don't cause cancer, but yes, it's very addictive, raise blood pressure. And I'm not encouraging people to do it. But this brings me around to a separate point. I just wanted to kind of paint that picture, but to a separate point. You and I have never had a public argument, nor are we going to now, about alcohol or about cannabis. But you and I share somewhat different views on alcohol. I've been very vocal, and perhaps our most popular episode ever was the episode on alcohol. I didn't foresee that, but and the deal is 0 is better than any if we're strictly looking at health. 2 per week is probably fine. If you're going to drink more, you should probably do a bunch of other things to reduce inflammation and offset it and get good sleep and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not telling people what to do. They should just know what they're doing. You've made the argument quite aptly that alcohol can be an important social lubricant for young and older people so that they can socialize and have a life. I worry that if young people now drink more, they're going to end up drinking alone. They're going to end up masturbating to porn more alone. They're going to end up with more hangovers after all their alone behavior. I think what you've argued for is the notion of healthy fraternity, healthy dating and socializing. You've mentioned bars a couple times. Alcohol as something that can bring people together in a positive way. If you don't mind, if you could elaborate on that, and maybe I'll just toss out cannabis as another one, because cannabis has problems and I'll acknowledge benefits of its own.
So I want to go to the first thing. First is I want to just touch on Navy. I went to Annapolis when I was 17. It was because my dad was looking to get out of paying for college. and decided I should go to Annapolis. And he took me and we did a tour. And we weren't very sophisticated. And it became so clear so fast that I was totally unqualified for Annapolis. Like the kids, the average SAT, these are the finest young men and women in the world. And also you have to get a recommendation from a senator. And it was just so ridiculous that we were even there. I was just not of that quality and that standard. But my dad was in the Royal Navy and decided, go to Annapolis because we don't have to pay for it. Anyways, but that was the last time I was at Annapolis. But if I could have one policy, so I'm advising a lot of Democrats running for president, which is like 40 of them right now, who all claim they're not running. They're all running. If you call me and say you're really interested in my viewpoint, it means you want my money and you're running for president. And I just say, look, that's fine. Come on the podcast and I'll write you a check. If I could have one policy, one blanket, if I had a magic one policy, it'd be mandatory national service. If you look at the lowest levels of young adult depression in the West, it's two countries. It's Israel and Singapore. And despite all the existential threats facing Israel, what does mandatory national service do? It gives you the sense that you're serving the agency of something bigger than yourself. It gives you purpose. You're handling dangerous equipment. It's the great equalizer. You don't care that this gay kid is totally different than you. You respond to his or her character and competence. Because if you're getting fired on, you don't give a shit how rich their father is. All you want to know is this person good at what they do? And you put people's lives in your hands and they put their life in your hands. And you're serving in the agency of something bigger than yourself. I spent time with an IDF battalion in Israel and had the same kind of experience it sounds like you had at Annapolis. These are young, beautiful, fit people outside all day, meeting friends, mentors, and mates. In Singapore, the president there, who's arguably one of the greatest leaders of the last century, said this is the most religiously diverse society in the world. We're going to have ethnic violence. There'll be a strong man who will weaponize this diversity and get people to turn against each other. So we need a different religion, and it's going to be the flag. And we need to get people praying to the flag again. And if you look at the great legislation in America in the 60s and 70s, which was probably the most productive, unified time in America, it's because many of our elected leaders had all served in the same uniform, and they saw themselves as Americans before they saw themselves as Republicans or Democrats. And I'm not just saying military service, senior care, donating time at a no-kill animal shelter, being a smoke jumper. There's a lot of ways to serve. But I think young Americans would benefit so enormously from getting outside of their own circle and seeing just how wonderful America and Americans are. And having a chance, and not only that, people say, well, it's easy for you to say you've aged out. I can tell you as a father of boys, if we set it up well and invested in it, I think they would really enjoy a rotation through different parts of America and different opportunities to serve. So the one thing I would do, going back to Annapolis and the IDF and what they do in Singapore, is mandatory national service. On drinking, first, my acknowledgement, as it relates to the intake of any substance, if it's Andrew Huberman or Scott Galloway, defer to Andrew Huberman's advice. I just want to say that up front. You just have the qualifications and the domain expertise here. I think, personally, the risks to a 25-year-old liver are dwarfed by the risks of social isolation. And I worry that with 40% fewer pubs now post-COVID in Britain and a lack of mating and a lack of connection, that the data I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, that 95% of people are able to integrate alcohol and drugs into their life without serious consequences. If you have a history of addiction, if you, for whatever reason, don't enjoy it, then by all means avoid it. If people are telling you that you're having an issue or a problem, or it's getting in the way of your work life, or you're one of those people that gets violent or mean under the influence, then for God's sakes, tone it down. But what I ask people is to look back on their younger days and say, what is the most important thing in your life? Relationships, friendships, finding someone to mate with. And I ask them, did alcohol play a role? You know, it's not easy to come in and lean in for a kiss without a glass of wine. Or let me put it this way, it is easier with a glass of wine. It's a lot of fun. I smoked a lot of pot and I drank a lot of alcohol in my 20s and in college, and it created a lot of wonderful bonding moments. And so what I'm saying, there's a balance and a trade-off. And what I would suggest is that everyone needs to make their own decision. But what scares me is the anti-alcohol movement in remote work has led to a level of isolation and fewer moments where people can bond, where people are willing to take a risk and go up to a strange person and say, hey, what's going on? So I worry that the anti-alcohol movement, what I see among young people, is that while they've demonized alcohol, it's not that they're not getting high. They're just doing a shit ton of drugs. And the thing I don't like about many of these drugs is that they're more solo activity or small group activity. I think alcohol is a group of people, I like to think, meeting new strangers. Whereas when I was in college, all the dudes who were doing cocaine, it was because they had no sexual currency and they would sequester a woman who liked cocaine and go into a bathroom.
That's creepy as fuck.
Totally creepy as fuck. And eventually everyone's like, if a dude's into cocaine, it means he has no game. I find with people when they do drugs, it's a small group of people and they sequester and it's isolating. Whereas with alcohol, and to a certain extent with marijuana, I found, it's more social and more bonding. So absolutely be cognizant of your addiction history. Absolutely be mindful of that or any other substance you're addicted to. But I believe, and I've said this on Bill Maher a bunch, and I've gotten some shit, but I think there's some truth here. I think young people need to drink more, go out, and make a series of bad decisions that might pay off. I don't think there's anything wrong with some alcohol. I worry that the risks of loneliness far outweigh the risks of alcohol, and that alcohol has been demonized as something that if you take one drink of alcohol, you're going to get cancer or you're going to become an addict. And I don't think the data is there to support that.